Okay, so the question was, what kind of quality measures are you familiar with that have been used in your workplace or that you've learned about or you're interested in? That you find useful?
Maybe patient report or patient experience. Am I muted? I said patient report or patient experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like on my job, we weren't doing it before, but I think something must have happened. So now patients get questionnaires that they have to answer. They ask, oh, how will you receive that reception? How is this? How is that? And all of that.
Interesting. So who has to administer those?
Okay, on my job, we do angiograms. So really, where I've seen it being done is with the patients that have this procedure. So the nurses who are in the recovery room administer it. And I think someone must have, I think, at times they have inspection, someone must have come and asked about that. That's why it was initiated on my job because we weren't doing that before.
Yeah. Is this a private hospital?
No, I work in a clinic. It's a cardiovascular clinic.
But
So
is it private?
it's private.
Okay. So either something happened, maybe they're trying to build like evidence of quality,
Yes.
or maybe they have donors or they have shareholders they have to justify to. They want to keep their investors. And maybe, oh, how long have you been there? Is this like something
I think is investors. I would much rather think is accreditation.
Okay. Is this a new accreditation or is it they've always had some?
At this time, I don't have the exact details. I don't know why it was started, but I think there must have been some kind of whatever. That's why it was initiated. Because I've been there for 5 years. We never did that until this year. I noticed that that's been done.
So what do you think in your experience gathering all this quality data? We've just talked about 3 examples. Readmission rates are tracked, infection rates, hospital acquired infection rates are tracked. And like you said, patient satisfaction are collected on occasional or routine basis, depending. Do you think that these actually have improved quality? They have like a feedback and they can improve quality? What are your thoughts there?
I believe it can improve quality because if someone comes back and reports back, most of your patients are saying so, then you have to make sure the staff are doing better than they're doing.
What could they do to correct that?
Okay. You know how it is, like jobs at times can be stressful, and there are times that you don't exactly mean to be not okay to a patient, but you're not okay because you're stressed yourself. They would, so if that kind of feedback gets to you, you would know to be able to step out of yourself to be extra good to patients, regardless of what you're going through.
Do they train for that? Or do they just do they train you in patient? I mean, at your level, with your degree of education and experience, would they actually step in and say you need training or something?
No, okay, so let me give an example. There was a time a patient came and reported to me that some staff did something, and I'll tell the administrator. And so there are times they have meetings on how to improve quality with the staff because we have quite a lot of medical assistants, and oftentimes they complain about that or even about the provider.
And it works. you
Yes,
think?
it does work.
Okay.
Well, for me, with regards to patient care, I think having a personal connection with patients goes a long way with every other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
A better
it
health
goes a
outcome.
long way
Mm-hmm.
with every other thing. So because if you have a personal connection with a patient, it's easier for them to understand you and for you to be able to meet them at the point of their need better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what do you think, Rhoda, about the readmission rates? Are they able to do anything with that information?
Well, they take it seriously because it'll affect it's to the point where it affects reimbursement. So insurance companies are saying, hey, if the patient's coming back to you guys for the same reason within 30 days, we're not paying you. So it's a pretty big concern and stressor hospital wide. So everyone's aware. All I guess all departments are involved.
And how do they, okay, so let's say that's happening and patients are coming back in 30 days, like what can be done? Where could they drill down to find inefficiencies or ineffectiveness?
They do a root cause analysis.
Sorry, Patty, go ahead.
They do a root cause analysis.
Mhm.
Basically, they'll look at who are the patients that are being readmitted, what are the diagnoses, what are the discharge state the patients are in upon discharge. Are they discharged back home? Are they discharged back to facilities? What resources do they need for discharge? It's a whole, like there's a whole team set up for that.
Fantastic. And they can make corrections?
Correct.
Okay. In your experience, it's successful?
It's a continuous work because the causes are so broad, or it's like so it varies so much
Right, there's
that it's
different.
continuous. They can do the medical reasons, but the social reasons, that's hard to
Yeah.
very challenging, the social
Very,
reasons.
very good point.
I was just going to contribute that when they have to also, because they get everyone, literally everyone's involved, social work, I mean everyone's involved, and sometimes if it's like a social issue, it's definitely more challenging versus if it's something medical and a diagnosis was missed, or sufficient antibiotics weren't provided, or that's, I guess, easier to pin. But then when it's a social issue like housing or compliance, then it gets tricky.
So if a readmission occurs at another facility, you're gonna get flagged? Know about that?
I believe if it's for the same cause, if it's for the same diagnosis, I believe yes.
The insurer would let you know, right? Because if the insurer is tracking the same person, right?
Right.
The insurer would-
They don't want to pay, that's the thing. So
I think they'll pay, they just get a penalty, right? The
yeah,
original.
I mean, yeah, of course they can't deny services. I mean,
Mhm. Okay, and oh, what's my other question? Oh, okay, so what about mortality? So we're talking about morbidity right now, people coming back, people flagging the network or flagging for investigation. And what about people dying? Do they monitor excess deaths?
The state,
that's reported.
the state gets involved. When it's a hospital cause of death, the state gets involved. So we are regulated and rules have to change regardless of, it's an immediate action when someone dies in a hospital. Not like a regular medical death, come in, they're dying. That's different from, say, someone came in and fall and end up dying from that fall. Then the state gets involved. And we have to regulate according to the state standards.
So
We
they
have to
monitor
prove
accidents, errors, and
med errors, all those
Correction.
things get reported to state.
Sentinel death.
Fentanyl too? Oh, yeah, administered by the hospital, you mean? Yeah. Okay, so do you think there's a business case for quality management in healthcare?
Absolutely.
Of course. First thing, there's liability. They have to pay out liability. Like first, patients sue. We've had cases where the hospital's being pulled into lawsuit because something that, of course, for more medical, and we look at it, we're like, oh, that's medical. That's not something you sue for, but they have I forgot. Oh my God, what is that? Labor, not relations. Oh my God, not patient relations, but they have a special department that addresses that. That if there's any financial involvement that has to do with anything regarding our performance, we get called on it and interviewed basically if it's a lawsuit that's on the verge.
Did I mention that film to you on Netflix, The Good Nurse? Do you know about that movie?
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Think about that. Well, Rhoda,
Didn't
describe
mention it,
it
but
and then describe it and tell me your thoughts.
It's exactly what you're talking about. So the hospital basically was aware, without ruining the film for anyone, was aware that this contracted nurse was, not doing their job, let's say, and was, breaking rules, but instead of,
You're so cute, Rhoda. You're keeping that.
instead of like, because I'm like, what if they want to watch it? I
Yeah,
don't wanna
yeah,
say
yeah.
what
Okay,
he's what
okay. That's good.
So I'm just so they're, instead of coming after him for the the things he's done, they just decide to like let him go because getting the law involved would then come down on the hospital because the hospital's technically liable because they staffed him. So it's crazy, but it's based on a true story apparently.
We recommend it anyway, right, Rhoda?
Yeah. Yeah, everybody should watch it.
Okay. What's the difference between
The
the
Good Nurse, you said? I didn't hear the name of the movie.
Yes, The Good Nurse.
Good
Nurse,
Nurse?
okay.
There's actually, I think there's an international version of the same film, and then there's the American one. So I just watched the American one. I don't know. I didn't watch the international ones.
Oh, I'll look it up to see if I know it. Let me see.
What's the difference between efficiency and effectiveness?
That's interesting.
So effectiveness gets the job done. Efficiency is, I guess,
And how do you get the job done?
how it gets done, or the ease in getting it done.
Efficiency implicates cost. You know, that it's the least resources to getting it done. I mean, we're making a simplification, no, in our own words, but yeah, that's what I'd say. Let me see.
Can I read what I just looked up?
Say it again.
Efficiency. Can I read what I just looked up about the two words?
Sure, yeah.
Efficiency is defined as the ability to accomplish something with the least amount of wasted time,
Yeah.
money, and effort or competency in performance. Effectiveness is defined as the degree to which something is successful in producing the desired result.
Very good. So yes. So so which one do you care about?
Oh.
Efficiency.
Effectiveness.
It's tough, right? Romy, was that you? No, who said effectiveness?
I did.
Oh, Barbara. Yeah. So now thinking about it, right? is there a trade-off? Like, can you not get both, or is there a trade-off? If you want more effectiveness, you're less efficient.
Yes,
You think there's a
there's a
trade?
trade-off.
I think it depends.
Okay. Think of an example. So all this can go into your little, your reflections. Okay, these are just all,
Okay, I think I like this.
yeah, giving you something to think about. So you can think about that, you can write about that. Like if you think about your parents being cared for, do you want to hear that they were cared for efficiently, or do you want to hear that they were cared for effectively?
Effectively.
Effectively.
That's how
See,
it
so
affects,
we
right?
all like effectively.
In the end. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think when I hear like efficiently, I for some reason I always think about like bus boys and like waiters, like because sometimes you'll go to the restaurant and then the bus boy, they'll like grab all the tables and they'll do it in like 2 seconds when they have like piles of
Yes.
plates, and I'm like, wow, they are very efficient, but I feel like that's effective too. It works. I guess most
Exactly. So yeah, so you want to think about, is it a trade-off, right? Can you do both? Yeah. When can you do both? And when is it a trade-off? Those are the considerations.
Can I give an example?
Yes.
Like during the holiday, I went to Morocco and we were in this resort. And so whatever cups we used, these guys were not washing them, they were just wiping them.
Hmm.
Okay. They were just wiping them because there was a lot of people. They were not washing them. So I'm like, oh my God. So I mean the cleanliness was questionable for all I care. Because they needed to attend so many people. So rather than go, they were just wiping them and put them back.
So in your case, in that example, it's a trade-off. You couldn't possibly get it done properly or quickly without compromising quality. So if you consider your workplace, how does it operate? Do you think it balances efficiency and effectiveness? Without, calling out where you work. I don't know where you work exactly, so don't worry. But
Yeah,
any thoughts of experience?
So, for example, where we're currently, unfortunately, I think we had 2 episodes of someone falling and dying recently.
wow.
And unfortunately, the suggestion is once you have a medlock, your risk for fall. And we're like, that's the stupidest thing ever.
What's a medlock,
Because
sorry?
it's the IV that they have.
But it's
Sometimes
true.
it's connected, sometimes it's not. So we're looking at it and we're like, we do not have the manpower because everyone that enters the hospital has one. So instead of just saying everyone in the hospital is risk for fall, let's just call it that. They decide to break it down even more, that if they have an IV in there, wherever, then they're also at risk for fall. The thing is, how do you clearly evaluate who is at true risk for fall and who aren't? Because you don't have the staff to cover everyone that's at risk for fall. So basically, everyone is going to be bedbound because everyone is at risk for fall. Everyone is going to get deconditioned that are easily to decondition. So then they're going to have a longer time in the hospital. And I've had that so many times. I go in my patient's room and the staff I'll ask the patient, did you walk around today? He's like, no, the staff told me I look like I might be unbalanced on my feet, so I don't walk. And then he finally starts walking. He's like, I think I feel dizzy. I think now we're talking, okay, physical therapy. Let's try to keep him another day too. So it's just like, are we really being efficient or effective by putting everyone on a watch?
Wow.
Not everyone on a watch, but everyone on fall.
Because of one incident?
Huh?
This is because of the one incident? It
Two.
triggered, or two, sorry, okay.
Coincidence that triggered. I guess everyone, they're trying to scramble to see the cause. But when you look at it I wasn't there, but looking at the situation, when family's there, the patient alarm bell is not on because family's watching. Apparently, there was a gap where family left and staff weren't aware. The patient got out the bed and they fell. End up getting had a bleed, getting a worse bleed, and eventually they pulled the plug and the patient died. Instead of looking at that specific situation and making changes to make us aware that if do staff education to teach family, if you're no longer going to be a bedside, just let the staff know. So then the staff could be cautious about put the patient back on watch or whatever services have available, versus telling everyone, okay, everyone here is now risk for fall.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't solve anything.
Mm-hmm. And it causes problems.
It causes problems.
Yeah. You've already
Because the
said that.
nurses are terrified. Now they want everyone to stay in the bed.
Were these falls by the average patient, or were these falls by
No.
unusually old and
Very
unusual?
It
Geriatric?
was, unfortunately, the one that fell, they had a bleed from he had a bleed from and unfortunately he wasn't doing well at the same time, but he was improving enough to get up off the bed or fall out of the bed.
Mm-hmm. So he came with a bleed. He arrived with, and then he was
Traumatic bleed.
he improved, and then he got out of the bed on his own. And
Fell and then the bleed worsened. Oh.
Worsened. It was his death. He died
Oh.
like 2 days later.
so he was not. It,
It was a sentinel event, to be honest. It was just one of those unfortunate situation where family left, staff wasn't aware, patient got out of bed, fell, and that was it.
wow. But that, like you said, if they could, if you were saying something about an alarm, there's an alarm system.
Correct. They have an alarm
They
system
have
that
an
they
alarm
use
system, but this time it didn't get triggered. It didn't get turned on.
because the family was there, because family interacts sometimes with patients, want them to sit up, move around. So instead of having the alarm going off every second, they turn the alarm off when the family is there.
Mhm.
And they didn't know the family left to put the alarm back on.
Well, that seems like a good place to focus for changes, the alarm system. And
Exactly.
what was the other one?
Exactly. Like,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm saying that's exactly where to focus
Yeah.
is focus on what was the main cause of this situation, instead of now having everyone that basically enters the hospitals on risk for fall. And they have the young patients that are walking able, elderly that are walking able, stuck in the bed.
Wow.
I know.
But that would increase the rate of pressure ulcers too.
And now who's coming
Yeah.
up with this?
It's
Who's
give
coming
or
up with
take.
the decision? Are the decision makers actually doctors?
That's what we asked. No. This is coming from nursing.
This is
That's
nurse.
what we asked. We're asking. So we wanted a clarification, because as providers, we're looking at our nurses, and we're telling them, listen, you need to walk this patient. And we do get kickbacks, pushbacks, because you're like, oh, I don't think it's safe for this patient to walk. I don't think, and even just for discharge, even when they're so terrified that
Mhm.
patients are being discharged, walking and able, and they're like, oh no, but we need to wait for a wheelchair to get the patient out. And I'm like, if
Mm.
the patient needs a wheelchair to go to the lobby, patient shouldn't be discharged.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
As simple as that. But they're so terrified that they might fall on their way out. I'm like, this is a perfect test for discharge.
Mm.
Perfect test for discharge. If there's something you want it to happen while they're still here and not after they leave when they're outside or something.
Now, the other case that you mentioned, there was another case. Was it similar, or was it for the?
It was just a simple fall out of bed.
Okay. So is there any way that you can influence this decision making?
I don't like politics at work.
Oh, that's what it takes?
I don't like work politics, because like everything, it's the red tapes, the suggestions, the red tapes, it's what's the word? Like they don't want our input per se because they have a team for that.
Right. But they
So
don't
it's
take
just
like
like
suggestion, they don't have a suggestion box even, like, there's no way to
they
get
used to
them.
have suggestion box. Those suggestion box just went away. The staff are not interested. The staff just want to just have a day where no one falls, which is so unrealistic because we were in the room with a patient one day, ANO times 3, no mobility problems. The patient, we're there talking, and the patient just next to us, the same ANO times 3 patient next to us just got out of bed and just fell into the garbage can. And we're like, what happened? They had the socks on, everything. The patient's just like, I just tripped over myself. And I'm just like, you cannot avoid falls. If patients are going to fall, you can avoid it, but you cannot avoid all falls. You cannot predict who is always going to fall. It doesn't.
On a related, but not exactly the same note, I watched Blue Zones on Netflix. Do you see that
Mhm.
series?
What's it called?
Blue Zones?
Blue zones, like the color blue?
Yeah, like the color blue. Blue zones are the name for areas where you have the most centennials, like the oldest people in the world live. And the first one they discussed, it's like 5 parts, I think. The first place they discussed was well, I can't remember what was the first, but Okinawa, Japan was the first or the second. And they explained the guy doing that, he's like a national, he's actually a retired athlete, and then he became a filmmaker, a documentarian for National Geographic. And so he set out to find the blue zones. People have written about the blue zones before. There's places in Italy, there's places in Japan, there's places in, I think in Asia, anyway, other parts of Asia. And then they also have a place in Northern California that are identified as blue zones. And it's interesting. The point about I wanted to make is they said, like looking at this Okinawa in Japan, how people live past 100 is they're just so active. Like they're just so active, and they don't sit on furniture, they sit on the floor. And because they sit on the floor, they have to get up from the floor. So you have like 100-year-old people doing squats to get up and down. Like I want to get rid of all my furniture, you know. I'm thinking that is so simple, but if you do it every single day, you know, you're less likely to fall. It was very interesting. Anyway, I recommend at least you watch the first episode. I think I saw 2. I didn't see all of it, but that fact of that activity, obviously it's too late once they're in the hospital. You can't be doing physical therapy with them getting up and down, but it's interesting to inform just the public in general. But yeah, once they're in the hospital, you don't want them doing squats. But they're definitely less likely to fall. The falling is it. I mean, I've always understood that. That's not like, I don't know, one of the top reasons why elderly people die is injury.
Yep.
Is injury, falls. So it's interesting. I wonder, I just wonder if Patty's decision-making team looks at national statistics really, because maybe it's something that's changed. You have older people more likely to fall, and they're going to do something so dramatic. Were they both older? Sorry, the patients? Oh no, they weren't. They were just sick.
One was older, one was younger.
Okay, they're just sick. So anyway, okay, so I think I'll put those questions up just to remind you what we talked about. I'll put these questions up. Okay, so I think we've exhausted those. So let's go to the economics, back to the economics piece, and go a little. Did any of you have a chance to look at my slides that I put up on economics? You can be honest.
Yeah, I have some notes.
Yeah. So what I want to say here is a few things. Let me just bring it up. So we talked about the demand and supply curves for the market. That's what we were talking about. And we talked about the factors that influence both demand and supply. And I laid out how we have a straight line. The straight line was motivated by this data that was collected. So this was collected in society. How many units would be demanded for different prices. And this could be determined over time. You could see how people respond to price changes. You can look in different locations. If prices go up, how people respond and bring together you could put this into a graph, right? And the graph in this case will be a line, but usually, like I mentioned, it's more curvy or maybe even a wobbly line. It's not a straight line, but the data here generate a straight line. I can show you how to do this in Excel if you're interested. You interested?
Yeah.
Make a line in Excel. Okay, I'm gonna need to use my my computer Excel. Do any of you know how to do this in Excel?
No.
So I'm gonna put, you see my Excel spreadsheet. So I'm gonna put on gonna highlight these two columns. And X and Y. And well, let's call Y is going to be, let's put the name. So on the vertical axis, we put price. And on the horizontal, so what I'll do is above it, I'll put X and Y. I don't know if X and Y helps you, but it's just my, this is my training to have a habit to call it X and Y. So X is going to be the quantity demanded. You guys want, you can do this along with me or just watch me. You can see the recording later. And then I'm going to put my data in. So it's going to be 0, 140. I'm going to do this whole thing first. 200, 400, 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200. And then what you do is you highlight the two columns. Are any of you guys doing this right now? So I don't know if I should go fast or slow. I'll just do it, and if you need me to do it
I'm
again.
watching it.
Okay. So I highlight the two columns, and then I go to insert chart. I wonder if I can insert, insert. And then you see graphs over here. Can you guys see my, yeah, you guys can see my cursor. So there's different charts over here. I think I'm going to pick this one. I don't want to scatter. I just want a line. So I'm going to go for this one. It says line. And it's going to make a straight line. And that was not what I wanted. I think I want scatter. Okay, sorry. Because it's going to take the two columns as different graphs. So let's go to insert. Sorry for the confusion. And I'm going to do scatter. XY scatter. So it puts them together and you get your line. So I use XY scatter. And I don't know why, but you can, if you double click in Excel, you can change anything. You can change titles and things, price versus quantity demanded. Now we don't have a connected line. We just have a bunch of dots, but if we want a connected line, I think you touch the area and you go up here. So these are all the key things you got to do, and I can repeat it. It's called add chart elements, and you can ask for a trend line, and it'll connect the dots for you. Okay, you can also do it by hand, but this is much more efficient. Okay, is that good? Do you want me to do it again? We're all good?
Good.
So it was insert, scatter, and then this thing called what happened? If I double click, add chart elements. Those are the three things you need to know. And we can do the same thing with the supply curve, get the line. Now, all right, so we talked about the demand curve, we talked about shifts and the factors that shift the curves or the lines. And we talked about market equilibrium. So we're going to end up here. The market's going to decide to provide 800 units at a price of $60. Let's say it did not. Let's say the price was $80. What would happen with a price of $80? How would you read this?
A rise in quantity.
Okay, so we're going to read demand from the demand line, and we're going to read the supply from the supply line. All right, so demand says that at 80, the demand's going to be 600 rather than 800, and the supply is going to be 1200. So this is an example where you have excess supply. Of course, it's a higher unit price, so the suppliers want to offer more, but in terms of demand, no one wants to, not so many people want to pay that much, right? So there's going to be a reduction in overall demand. So you have excess supply. So what's going to happen? At that excess supply, there's going to be some of the suppliers are going to offer lower prices to get rid of their stuff, right? So that's how you're going to witness that they're going to offer lower prices to get rid of their stuff, and that's gonna move us, to a different point. So more people are going to come in and offer. They're going to accept that higher price. Sorry, they're going to accept that higher price, but some people are going to leave, right? Because they don't want to pay that higher price. And so you're going to see this slow adjustment as then even, there's still some excess supplies. So some suppliers are going to offer less and less or lower prices. And it'll bring some people into the market that are willing, it's going to remove some people from the market because they're not willing to pay that price, but it will clear out the excess supply. So that's the idea. This is an inefficiency. This is seen as an inefficiency, right? Because you have waste of this extra resources that nobody's going to buy. So to use them up, people are going to offer them for lower and lower rates. Some people will leave supplying the product because they can't compete with the other people offering at lower and lower prices. So that's what's gonna be, that's how you witness like going, sliding back down to A. Okay, so it will be short-lived. In a perfectly competitive market, it'll be short-lived and excess supply will not last that long. Okay, let's try it the other way. If someone can tell me the story, what's gonna happen? So let's say the price was down here. So you have a bunch of people, suppliers undercutting and offering a lower price. What's gonna happen? The suppliers at that price, a lot of people will have left. They're only willing as a market to offer 400 units. However, on the demand side, which we read off of this line, they're going to ask for 1,000 units. So how is this going to adjust back to A? What are we going to call this first of all? Does anybody know?
Economics?
Yeah, but what are we going to call this gap here? I call this
Oh.
excess supply. What do I call that?
It's disequilibrium. I don't.
Right? It's equilibrium, but it's excess demand, right? There's more demand than
demand,
supply. But those are all correct, excess demand. So how does it correct? So at
By
this,
driving up the price.
so yeah, but how does it happen? So these people, there's going to be people that enter, offering to pay higher prices. So they're going to say, well, you know what, I'm willing to pay a higher price for that. And so there's going to be people, there's going to be suppliers offering a higher price. And these ones are going to say, well, I'm going to offer these suppliers are also going to say, well, I want to catch that demand. So I'm going to offer a higher price too. So this bids up the price, right? As demanders leave, the ones willing to pay the higher price are going to stay. So we're going to lose people, right? Less units are purchased, but we're going to gain units of supply for higher unit cost. So people are going to drop out in terms of demand. People are more production is going to be made only for the higher price, and we're going to end up at A. So this is how the market clears. This is what we call it, market clearing or equilibrium in the market. So it's very important to talk about, so yeah, excess supply is also known as a surplus. Excess demand is also known as a shortage, right? We don't have enough units to satisfy the demand. Assuming that the market price adjusts quickly to equilibrium level, surpluses and shortages do not occur in free markets. So the question becomes, are all goods free markets for goods? There are 5, there's like a lot of assumptions, but every economic model, even the finance models we talked about, they all have assumptions built into them. Okay, we make a lot of assumptions to create an abstract model that we can derive conclusions from. It's not perfect, but that's how it works. So whenever anybody talks about economics, you have to ask, what are your assumptions? Like, what do you operate against? So if someone talks about market equilibrium or perfect competition, they've assumed 5 things, at least. That each firm supplying the good is small relative to the market and has no influence on price. So this excludes like oligopolies that we have, right? Where there's just a few big firms running things, which is really, the media. They talk about the media being like 5 conglomerates running the media, right? That's not the same thing. That's not free competition in that sense. When we talk about pharmaceuticals, they like to say, pharmaceutical production, free markets, but you see in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of mergers. A lot of companies have merged, and still it looks like there's a differentiation, but they're not small. They're very large and they're very influential. So start to think, okay, I don't know, is this perfect competition in healthcare? Is it really free markets? Firms and products are supposed to be substitutable, and that's not really possible when you have patents on products or pharmaceuticals. Each consumer is small relative to the market and has no influence on the price. And this is a huge one, okay? The next one, the fourth. Perfect information about prices and quantities is available. Do we really have perfect information when it comes to healthcare? It's very hard because, in fact, patients don't really know what things should be worth. They just show up and because they don't know what's wrong with them, right? They're going to an expert who's going to help them, so they don't really know what treatment should be worth. So they're not going to be able to play a real role in determining the right price to pay for things. So perfect information is a real issue. And sometimes you may have heard of asymmetric information. It's the kind of information that exists in the healthcare industry. Even the doctor or the nurse practitioner operates without perfect information. Like the goal is to get it all, but you don't have perfect information about the patient, how the patient will respond to certain products. You just don't know.
You say that, sorry. It was just interesting because when I had my son, you'd think that the delivery with anesthesia is more expensive, but it was actually the room stay that was the biggest bulk of the bill. I think it was like 2/3 of the bill versus the medical services they provided.
The most expensive hospital stay, I don't think people know this, but on average, the most expensive hospital stay, I mean, except for those extreme cases, I'm talking about on average, the most expensive hospital stay is a delivery.
Delivery, I was gonna say.
Well, I know that, I've known that for like 15 years, but I mean, never thought about it until I saw
Yeah.
the data and it freaked me out. And I don't think people realize that. I think it's important that they know that. And why is it so so expensive? Everybody loves babies, of course, everybody loves babies, but it's very curious, very interesting, and I don't want to, I'm just interested to know. I have never had a chance to really explore it, but it's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. So, and then the fifth is there's easy entry into an exit from the market. Is that even true? Is it easy for someone to say, oh, well, I'm going to produce an iPhone. I'm going to compete with iPhone. Like it's not that way, right? In technology either. So this model of equilibrium that helps you understand, supply and demand and equilibrium, it really depends on these assumptions. And so I want you to understand that. So okay, I'm not going to talk about value right now. This is all about value. What I want to talk about is, okay, we're going to talk about the demand and supply analysis, even though, I mean, I've laid out that understanding equilibrium, hold on. Understanding that the model that I presented depends on those assumptions, we can add a little more realism to our analysis in time. But first I want to say, let's review distinguishing between the difference in a shift in the curve and a movement along the curve. And then we're going to talk about how the impact of the Affordable Care Act will influence wage rates for nurses. The full impact. So we talked about So how could I go from, what factors could influence me going, the demand curve shifting from 0, so this is where we start, this is initial, so usually we use 0 for the initial, to this one, D1. The demand has increased. So you can go back through your notes and see what are factors, what can influence
If
demand.
there's scarcity of the product, if the product is not very available, there'll be more demand for it.
Go back to the ones we talked about last class. There's a whole list of factors that would make a unilateral, like a shift at every single price, the demand increased. I made a parallel shift. So there were several variables. I'll pull them over.
Is it taste patterns? Is that
Mhm.
taste patterns?
Yeah.
Yeah, taste patterns.
So preference
Uh,
or
money, income.
right. So it work. No, that didn't work. I have this roundabout way of doing this. So these were our variables that we discussed. Okay, so you have right now in the States an influx of people from other countries, right? Migration. And but like we're in a crisis or emergency state of influx of people. And so what's going to change here? Number of consumers in the market across the board, right? So
Right.
there's going to be an increase in demand for services. If we're going to talk about this being nursing hours services. So this is going to shift up here. And what could shift it down? Try and put it in the context of nursing hours. Realistic or not. Inflation. Inflation will affect income of consumers, right? They're going to have
Right.
disposable income. They'll have relatively less income, less ability to spend. So this could shift back demand, just showing you how it works. That's different than looking on one line itself and talking about how a price change influences the quantity demand, like we talked about. The higher the price goes, the less quantity demanded there will be. Is that okay? So that's the difference between a
Yes.
shift and the effect of the relationship between price and quantity demanded. And let's talk about supply. What's going to change from, how are we going to change from this supply curve to the others? Let's grab the variables. So asking you to remember this. Okay, so how could we go from this SO line to up here?
Increase the price.
So what's happening is at every, sorry, I interrupted you. So at every price, there's less demand. Or at every price, sorry, there's less supply. Well, I don't know why I said that.
Uh-huh.
Less supply, sorry. How could that happen?
You said for,
At
sorry, can
every
you,
price, there's less supply. So here, and if I take a line, you know, and I look here,
because they're not willing to sell, to provide at that given.
well, what would cause
Yes.
that? What would cause that? So there's less supply here. So, okay, nurses. So this is your supply curve for nurses. What could happen so that at every price you're supplying less? Notice this is called quantity supplied now.
And price being like salary or something, or
Yeah, hourly
Or-
rates. Let's talk about the hourly rate.
there's less staff willing to work for that price? Is that,
Okay. But why? I put down, I have 6 different variables here. Put it in frame it in terms of the variables.
so the list of the variables, it would be price, money, income.
Where's income? Price of good or service. Okay, let's talk about what happened with COVID. Let's talk about what happened with COVID.
There was decrease in.
There's a decrease. So this happened, right? Which one of these could explain that? So you agree, right? We went from here, we shifted back across the board. There was less supply.
Maybe the
guess-
price of the goods, because where they were actively working, they saw that they can make more money through agencies. So they had a decreased supply. They were leaving.
So, so we're gonna use, okay, you're talking about comparable prices then, related. You're referring to this one. So you're saying that they left because they went and did something else, that then they can make money somewhere else.
Yes.
The related, you know, that's the price of goods related to production. But did the price increase? Or they were just comparing it and saying it's not worth it. So you know what's really happening? what's really happening is the input price is going up, like the willingness to offer the, like, it's more costly for a nurse to go now to, it's a greater risk. It's more costly. Okay, maybe it's not dollars and cents, but it translated into dollars. Like they're like, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to do this. It's not worth it. It's too risky. Or I don't want the stress, or it just became too burdensome. So
Uh-huh.
the input price is like to actually offering the service, what it would take to show
During
up.
COVID, the nurse input price costs went up. They were getting actually
They
paid more
did go
nurses.
up as well. Yes,
Yeah, they were getting paid more.
yes, yes. They weren't.
Were.
They were.
That's why there was they were complaining that there was shortage because they were leaving to get more money to do the same thing.
Mhm.
Well, because they found out they could get, so basically salary, because there was short staff, they had to increase staff salary to
Yeah, so,
have.
okay, so you're
people
talking
show up.
about, that was a secondary effect. First of all, people didn't show up, right?
Yeah.
And then you had the price increase. So let's talk about that. Okay, first though, I want to talk about what would lead to a supply increase. Now you guys are kind of saying that. So you're saying, so something happened. So something happened, there was a whatever, reduction in supply hours of nurses in the market. And then, okay, so let's just talk about the shifts then. Let's talk about the shifts to avoid confusing. Okay. So there could be simultaneous shifts when demand and supply shift simultaneously. All right, so let's see if we can describe what's going on here. Like we're still doing like a static analysis because we're going to think of one at a time.
Okay.
So we're going to start with this curve or this line, supply and demand here. So we're at A. So suddenly there's a demand, right? So COVID happens. Demand shifts up, more sick people. So demand shifts up, we have more sick people, and where do we end up? Up here, right? You guys see that? So I'm gonna number these. So here's gonna be where we start. Then we're gonna go. D1 or D is gonna shift up because of an increase in demand. So what should happen to price? So this is what you're talking about. With an increase in demand, there should be a supply increase, but only with a higher price.
Only with a higher price, right?
With a higher price, can that happen? So now that the higher, so let's just talk about this world, what's going on here, okay, in this diagram. So with the higher price, what's going to happen? That's going to attract nurses back. It's gonna attract people to the industry, whatever it is. So they're going to come, and then there's going to be a shift completely in the industry of supply because there's this higher price. So there's a difference, like there's two shifts happening. There was a demand shift initially, and we end up here. But then, because this is happening and people see, look, they're offering higher prices, we're going to supply en masse. The market supplies more, and that's a supply shift. So we end up at B. So the reason why this is not marked here is because it kind of happens simultaneously. Everyone sees the trend. And so we end up at B. Now, this is all assuming those 5 things that I told you, like you should be able to adjust, everything adjusts quickly with perfect information and all that, but that's how these models work. So then we end up here. And how could we end up, like, okay, so this is if it's a small increase in supply, but what if there's a huge increase in supply? I mean, that could have happened too. So it's a dotted line here saying, okay, well, what if there's a huge increase in supply? What happens? So if we have just a moderate increase in supply, the price doesn't go below the original price. You notice that? That's the point I'm trying to make here. So when people talk about demand and supply, it's not crystal clear the impacts of shifts. In this case, the price still remains above the original price. But if there's a huge supply increase, an influx of services or product, the price actually goes down. Okay, so I want you guys to think about an example you guys can use. Nursing or something else. Think of an example. We're going to put an example on this. Let me give you a few minutes, 10 minutes to think about that. Just tell me a story so you can remember this better. Because this is really important, because people will say, oh, supply and demand, the price should go up. Supply and demand effect, that the price should go down. This is a perfect example. If the supply shift is not massive, the price could remain higher than original. In both cases, the quantity does increase. But the question is, what happens to price?
Wait, because I don't know, I was thinking about during COVID, like the price of like oxtail or meat, for example, the demand didn't change. I'm not sure if it did change, but the price shot up so high. But the other parts of the meat didn't increase as well. Like it was just one particular part of the cow that actually shot up.
Okay. So, and you're just like, why would that happen?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's
I was
all
gonna give the
whole-
toilet paper example.
like chicken wings during the pandemic, the chicken wing, the price went up so high, but the thighs didn't go up, the legs didn't go up, but it's the same chicken that's being purchased, that's coming from a chicken.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't recognize. That's interesting. Something with supply chains, I guess. But that it's the same chicken. I know what you're saying. How can that? It's still a chicken. So you're talking about raw, right?
Yeah, wrong.
Sure.
I guess maybe because of COVID, it was harder to get them.
Yeah, but why thighs weren't hard to get and wings were, is her question. It's just
Oh.
something she noticed. Okay, I don't know the details of the slaughter industry, but that's an interesting observation. That's an interesting observation. Yeah, well, you think about it, because let's all think about it for a few minutes. See if somebody can come up and explain it using this diagram so you can remember it better. Let me continue with my numbering scheme. So this is 4. So I'll call this 4, and this is 5, I guess. So in your experience with COVID, we ended up at 4. A higher price. With nursing, nurses were paid more. It
I
wasn't
guess it depends on where you work. I didn't get paid more.
okay, but okay, so there's other issues there again that it could be because they couldn't adjust this, or in this example, I'm just showing that this would be in perfect markets where they can adjust. Maybe there's some restrictions on them being able to offer higher prices, but in the market, it could be a small response, it could be a large response, and that'll make the price go up or down.
I
Okay.
think there was a high demand for nursing. It wasn't that it was just a shortage per se, it was just a high demand for nurses. So because the demand was so high, the prices, the price per nurse because the competitions were there between travel nurse agencies. So what perked, even though they worked in the same area, it was what they were offering the travel nurse that made a difference, and price was one of them.
So I guess a point I'm making is this explains what you're describing more at 4 than it would here. And it's the demand increased and the supply also increased, leaving a higher price on average.
So now what's happening are a lot of nurses left from, I guess, staff nurse to travel nursing. So now there's a nurse shortage because everyone went to travel nursing. So there's a staff nurse shortage.
Okay, so are we going back to S? Well, anyway, we'd have to have 2 different graphs, I think, for the travel nurse and the the staff nurses. But okay, I think you guys are getting the idea, but I just want one more example. If anyone has an example that explains this.
I guess we could say now that they have so many travel nurses, the pay has decreased. So now, like before COVID, during COVID, travel nurses were getting paid over $100 and something per hour. Now travel nursing is just like $70. It's dropped all the way down to 70.
So do you think that this happened then?
Yeah, that happened. That's happening currently.
Okay. So there you go. That could be your example then, yeah.
Professor,
Yes.
can we use or can you I'm trying to figure this out maybe with the concept of Lysol during COVID,
Okay.
how the
Okay,
demand
okay, let's try that. Okay, go ahead. So we start
the
here.
demand, yeah, so the demand for the demand for Lysol went up during COVID. And because of the demand, it got very expensive. But then as COVID started to, phase out or just diminish, then Lysol pretty much went down to
Talk
its
to
normal
me about
price.
the Lysol suppliers. Didn't they churn out a bunch more product?
Well, it was scarce. At one point, it was scarce.
Yeah.
We couldn't find it because the demand was greater than the supply.
Yeah. So we were here on 3.
Right.
And
So
then,
but in the beginning, before COVID, where would we be then?
hey,
We would be at 8, which is like that's the medium.
That's the original price, and then
Equilibrium.
what happens,
Right.
and the demand for Lysol shoots up because the demand curve or the demand line goes like this, it shifts, and we end up here. And then some people figure out, oh wow, that's a really high price. I want to offer Lysol or some cleaner, like even the healthier cleaners came out and they started producing more than they would normally, and so we ended up on here. So it started to, but if a lot of people got into the market making cleaners, then we would end up on the dotted line and the price would be overall lower. I don't know if that happened, but what did you notice? Did the price go back to like a normal price?
It went down. I don't think it's
Prices went
still
up, right? Because it was like price gouging if you did that. I think the price, you just couldn't find it.
Well, I mean, I think when you're talking about price gouging, that's just different places. But I think just because it was in such high demand, the price did go up, but eventually the price did start to go down. And I think now what's happening, there's a surplus because now you can actually find it and it's just more available now. So where would it show that the supply actually increased and then the demand
Line here,
decreased?
it's a supply increase, so the price started to go down. And if there's a ton of supply increase, the price would even go lower than we started on 5. That's the meaning of this thing. It all depends. So if somebody says, oh, you know, there was an increase in demand and the price goes up when there's an increase in demand. Well, not necessarily, because supply response. The price could go up or the price could go down relative to A. So it depends on the response of the suppliers in the market as a whole.
What explains those COVID tests in the store? They're like $30 each, but there's so much COVID tests everywhere. I mean,
Now,
why are they even selling it for so much? And you can get it free everywhere.
So they're $30 in the store. They were like 15, right? At one point. So they've gone to $30 right now? Or
Maybe
they
it's 2 in the pack. I don't know. I was just at Walgreens and I saw it and I was just like, why are they selling the COVID test for $30? And I have like so much COVID tests in my house and everybody has access to
yeah,
COVID.
and you can get a free one.
Yeah, they were mailing it to your house. I'm pretty sure you can go to the city hospital and grab a few if you wanted. I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that, but that's a good question too. How they're getting
With the
away.
elderly shopping, I was like, maybe she just doesn't know. They just taking advantage of her, I guess.
Yes, yes, yes. There's just such a overstock. They over responded. They overshot the expectations. Like how many vaccines have been wasted? So terrible. Okay, so I think we're good with this one. You guys have I'm even thinking on this one about the TVs, sorry, the monitors. You know how to buy a new, I don't even know what they are now, 4K screen, it's like $5,000, just like all the screens, right? And then suppliers come in the market and the price goes down. But when a lot of suppliers come and offer, the price actually goes down. So when they figure out how to make it, when it becomes really easy to produce it en masse, so tons of supplier in the industry will actually lower the price. That's another example outside of healthcare. So you guys, I think you get it, right? So the point is that an increase in demand doesn't necessarily result in a higher price. It depends on the response of suppliers. If they're going to react by shifting, en masse providing, depends how responsive they are to the increase in demand. Okay, so this is another thing to think about in terms of the way that, the way that we're drawing these lines. So if let's say demand goes down, so we no longer need those COVID tests. So we're going to start at A. And we no longer need those COVID tests. So demand for all those COVID tests went down. How does the market respond? So we end up at B. Sorry, not B. We end up at let's do this step by step. So we're at 1 here, and then the demand shoots down and the new equilibrium would be here. The price falls. So There's an example that goes with this. So what would make supply increase? Okay. Hold on. Let's do this one. This is better. Sorry. So this one, so the COVID test, we don't need COVID tests anymore. Demand goes down. So we go from A, and then we end up here. But let's say, understanding that this is happening simultaneously, suppliers stop producing so many COVID tests. Okay, so they shift completely here. So we end up at B. Everybody's okay with that? That makes sense? So what happened? What's the net effect? What happened to price and quantity, in other words? So if going from A to B, what happens to price and quantity?
Price dropped, and so did quantity.
Yes, the price dropped and so did quantity. And then is this so if demand drops and supply drops, both price and quantity drop, and that is going to be, is that necessarily true, or does it depend on the amount of reduction? So if there's a huge drop in supply, is that still the same thing? We're going to end up at C. So quantity, either with the B or C, the quantity goes down, but the price might increase. It all depends on shortage, like the idea of, there not being enough. Okay, so we're trying to look for here for like general rules. And just because the demand and the supply both dropped doesn't necessarily mean that the price and the quantity is going to drop. It depends on the response. It depends on the relative change. Okay, so the price, if suppliers really leave the market or they stop producing, and when I say leave the market, they stop producing that good, then there will be a sense of a shortage, and people will be prepared to pay a higher price for that product. So, we're looking for general rules. And then this is just saying that it depends, right? So it depends on the relative response to the situation. So what we have so far is this one that we talked about, where they both increase, and the conclusion was that price may rise or fall. It depends on their relative shifts. It's not going to be conclusive that this results in a price increase or price drop. That's really what I'm trying to say. And then just like the second case, I'm jumping over to this one. If they both go down, definitely quantity will drop. But again, the effect on price is indeterminate, depends on the relative impact. So when somebody says, oh, the demand went down and the supply went down, so we know the price must go up. Well, you don't really know that. It depends on which one was more strongly affected. Are you guys okay with this?
So, like Romy said with the Lysol during COVID, I think it's like one can alone of Lysol is the price of what they are now, which is like 4 cans. So I think now, like she said, the demand for it has reduced. So now you can go in the store, or like say BJ's, for example, and get 4 cans for what they were selling during COVID for the price of 1.
Mm-hmm. So where are you gonna be? If you're gonna, is it S1 or S2?
Well, the price kind of went back down.
So then we're just here,
Yeah. We're back to baseline.
back to oh, you think we're here?
Yes, we went back to baseline. You can step in the store and get Lysol for the price the same way we did pre-COVID.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna leave with you guys to think about it. You have well, I'll give you 2 weeks. I'll give you 3 weeks to think about this. This will be for your next assignment. I want you to describe, give me a story for this one. This will be your assignment in like 3 weeks, because I got to give you an economics assignment. So this is where demand falls and supply increases. And the result is, so the 2 examples I gave where they both go in the same direction, price is uncertain. It depends on the relative impact of the shift. When we're looking at the reverse, quantity is the uncertain thing. Okay, so try and give me a storyline for that, or a storyline for this one. I won't make you do both. Again, price, in this case, when demand goes up, price certainly rises. When demand goes up and supply goes down, price will rise. That's pretty clear, right? Right? Demand goes up, supply goes down, for sure price is going to rise. But what's going to happen to quantity? So come up with a storyline for this one. And then over here, demand goes down and supply goes up. Definitely price will fall, but we're not sure about quantity. Okay, so that'll be the third assignment. I mean, 3 weeks, the second assignment.
Or you only want one story either.
Yeah, just one of yeah, either one you can think of. Give me a storyline. All right. So that was slide number 41. I'll put it in a formal question anyway, and 42. That'll be part of the assignment. I'll put some other questions in there too. Okay, let's talk about outside of equilibrium. Reality of life is that the government gets involved. Doesn't leave it to the market to decide. The government can get involved setting prices. What are some examples of setting prices that government does that you know about?
Like we discussed earlier, the cost of healthcare.
Right. They can control the price of healthcare.
With the HMOs, DRGs, none of that.
Okay. Well, what about in the general public, just in general, not in healthcare? What's another thing the government can do? What about rent? Rent control. Government controls rent, right? That they can charge, that landlords can charge. That's
Not,
not
not in private.
huh?
Like not if it's like a private house, right?
If it's a private property, I mean, they like, if you rent a space and you want to change your rent, you can only do it a certain percentage. There's controls.
That's true.
But that's like in rent control properties, but not every, because these prices are astronomical. So that's why I'm saying that. I'm like, they're not controlled. I guess only in the rent control buildings.
I don't know in New York, I assume there's
yeah.
controls, like that you can't just charge an astronomical rent, but you're thinking in general,
They
yeah, it's
do.
expensive in New
Mhm.
York, but I mean,
Yeah, and the rent controls, they can do like if it's like a 1 year lease, it's like 1%. If it's like a 2 year lease, you
yeah,
can increase by 2%. But like if it's like a private house and it's not like rent controlled, then they can just charge. They can charge you 1,000 this year, and then next year they increase to $2,000.
No, not in New York. I don't
It
think so.
happened. What do you? Okay.
no,
If it's your private
I
house,
don't
yes,
know
you
New
can. If
York.
you have a lease for a year and you sign it for $1,000, and the next year you want to increase it by another $1,000, and it's not a rent controlled property, you can.
Okay, okay, I'll have to look. Because,
Yeah, it
so anyway,
happens.
I'm just saying as an example, okay, that government controls rent, maybe not all rents, like you've explained, but the government interferes on rents, and it also interferes on, so it provides a ceiling. You can't go higher than a certain rate. And it also, government can intervene and it can restrict prices from going too low. So like wages, right? There's a minimum wage law that you can't hire somebody for $2 an hour. So you could, but it'd be off the record, right? So these are the two ways the government gets involved for their own reasons. But in terms of economists disagree on a lot of things, but they pretty much agree on the inefficiencies of government interference in these two respects. So here's some examples just to look at it. So this is in the realm of what we've been talking about, right? So let's look at the government coming in, where this is your equilibrium price for monthly rent in a rent controlled area or building and facility. And so you're getting 50 units for $2,000, let's say, a month. And the government comes in and says, no, that's too high. You're only allowed to charge $1,000 a month. What's the problem with that? So somebody explain to me, what is the problem with that? How do we read this chart?
You have limited amount of units.
Right. So in terms of supply, only 22 units are going to be offered. And in terms of demand has increased. So you have a shortage. This is not good for society. I mean, people can start talking about homeless, but you're going to have people, you can explain the problems with this in terms of society, right? Creating a problem. So the government thinks it's doing something nice, but unless you're going to enslave landlords to offer space, you're not going to get them to offer it. So then the government has to get involved, making public housing, taxes have to go up and all these things. And it's all delayed in adjustment, where the market could do this better. But anyway, we've been spending a lot of time talking about that, but that's the argument against price ceilings. What happens with the floor price? Government coming in and saying, all right, here we have equilibrium. I think I have my, right. Okay, so we're here in equilibrium. There's 50 units of labor for $2,000 a month. and the government comes in and says, you have to pay $3,000 a month. Okay, these my numbers are really high, but okay. So let's say they had to pay $3,000 a month minimum. So what's wrong with that? So you look here, you read it here. And at that rate, this is the number of units looking for, so you have 84 units of labor looking for work, but suppliers are only ready to supply 32 units. Sorry, suppliers, wait a second. I'm doing this wrong because demand in this scenario that I'm giving, demand for workers is backwards. The demand for workers should be from here. Yeah. Demand for workers is from here, 32 units. And yeah, and the supply is 84. Did I say that? Okay, so this is the supply and this is the demand is 32. So you have here excess supply. Okay, so we've seen this already. Before, this is excess supply. This is excess demand. You have unemployment. So you can put it in terms of what you hear in the news. You're going to have unemployment as a result. Due to the minimum wage. And you're going to have, you know, I'm saying it strongly. I'm not going to say homelessness, but you have I'm not going to say homelessness because I'm not going to go that far, but that you have insufficient housing. So government can wreck things. But it keeps coming up and trying to fix what it messes up. And we're forever stuck in a loop. And government just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, never gets smaller, to fix the problems that it caused. That's the story of the economics story. Okay, and this is just a discussion about looking at the inefficiencies caused by ceiling and floor prices. You can read about that. And that's it. Those are the main things I wanted to tell you in terms of economics. And any comments, questions? Okay, so I want I want to spend a little bit more time on economics, but I'm going to do it at the beginning of the next class. I'm going to ask that you have a look at the syllabus. I'm going to put some materials into this week's readings. Next week, we're going to start accounting. So I hope you can get through the first 4 weeks of readings. I'm going to add another bit of economics in and talk about it next week, but I really want to focus next week on accounting in chapter 6. Yeah, I have some documents because I want to talk about, we've used the example of free markets, but we know that healthcare is not a free market situation. And some aspects of it are, sometimes pharmaceuticals is used with that respect, but you can see government is making arrangements with pharmaceutical companies to produce products and otherwise interfering with the market. So it's not pure, perfectly competitive market. So we want to talk a little bit about the impacts or the implications of that. So economics is about how people make choices, how industry makes choices to provide products, and how consumers make decisions about how much, how much to buy as a society. And when government gets involved, it's to incentivize certain things and move society in certain ways. So you can't really divorce government from the picture because there is a role for government. When markets fail, when there are no markets, government steps in. For instance, in healthcare, we discussed some of the asymmetries that there are in patients not knowing exactly what they need, providers not knowing exactly how patients will respond to certain services, and that creates asymmetries in the system. And there's the aspect of there being healthcare insurance, right? Because people want the riskiness of it all. They don't know when they're going to need things. So they don't know that, not knowing, again, asymmetry. They don't know they're going to need services. So they want to get insurance. So that produces a new market, this insurance market. But there's a problem with the insurance market. The insurance market is not in a position. Well, society doesn't like how insurance operates because it looks like insurance has the incentive to only offer insurance to healthy clients. And so the government steps in and makes sure that there's insurance for people who aren't the healthiest or are more likely to be sick. So the elderly and the poor. So the government does play a role in healthcare provision. We can't avoid it because we are a first world. We're part of the West, right? And so most Western countries, they have a system of socialized medicine. And we talked about this before in terms of the states being different and distinct because it is the arm of innovation. And anyway, so it plays a bit of a different role and has a different structure as a consequence. So we're going to talk about how that all plays together, the interplay of provider, consumer, and insurers, okay? And talk a little bit more about the economic system that we really are looking at in healthcare, and then jump into accounting. So if you guys can just, have a look on what I put up for week 4. And then we're going to start week 5 in accounting next week. Any questions for me? You guys are going to work on your assignments and I'll send you a message I guess on Monday, I'll send you a message about meeting on Tuesday. I'll see what's good, or I'll just stay in Zoom and you can pop in when you want to ask me questions. Does that sound good?
What time are you going to be on Zoom? From 6?
Yeah, I'm thinking I could be like maybe 6:30. Yeah. What do you think? Is that any good? Can we decide that now then? So I'll just be on Zoom at 6:30, and if you guys, so 6:30 till 8. I'll put it on the platform, so we have a record of me saying that. Okay, so 6:30 to 8 on Tuesday on Zoom. It'll be like an office hour. So it'll just be open if you guys want to pop in and ask questions or see other people asking questions.
Can it be Monday rather than Tuesday? Like Tuesday is the day before the assignment is due.
Yeah, because Monday I have another class, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I can't on Monday.
Tuesday, can we discuss the assignment if we do have questions? I mean, obviously it would have been, for the most part, completed already, but
Yeah, you know, I can make it due at 11 o'clock on Wednesday. So you guys,
Okay.
after class, is that okay, TY? So it can be due, I think, did I say that? Did I say 11:59? So it can be due at night, like after class on Wednesday. So then you can talk to me Tuesday night. We can resolve things.
On Wednesday, sir.
Wednesday we'll have class if you have last minute things to ask, and then after the class, you can finish it up and send it.
makes sense.
Okay.
Professor, if we finish the assignment before, can we send it to you to get feedback
Absolutely.
before the due
Oh,
date?
yeah, if you want me to look at it, sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, guys, ladies. Thank you for your time, your wisdom.
Thank you too.
Bye. See you
You
next.
have a good night.
Bye all.
Night. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.